The Canadian government has unveiled a plan to protect its steel industry from the impact of U.S. tariffs. On July 16, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that Canada will introduce a tariff rate quota for steel imports from countries with which it has free trade agreements, excluding the United States. Under the new rules, shipments up to 2024 volumes enter duty-free. Any volume beyond that will face a 50% tariff. Speaking at the Walters Group fabrication plant, Carney emphasized that, to build big things again, we need our steel industry to advance, not retreat, and outlined steps to bolster domestic production, protect market share, and support affected workers. Drawing on a recent federal review of steel trade arrangements, Carney announced that by the end of the month, Canada will tighten its tariff rate quotas for steel imports from countries without a free trade agreement. For steel products from non-FTA countries, we will tighten the TRQ level to 50% of 2024 volumes and apply a 50% tariff on any imports beyond those levels, he said. For nations covered by existing agreements, including South Korea and other USMCA partners, Carney stated that duty-free access will be capped at 100% of last year's volumes, with the same 50% rate applying to any overages. He also flagged additional duties on steel containing metal melted and poured in China, reinforcing the government's intent to protect our market from those secondary effects. Carney was keen to stress that there would be no immediate change to U.S. tariffs as Ottawa continues negotiations with Washington. Our existing arrangements with our USMCA partners will remain the same, including no changes to our current trade measures with the United States, he affirmed, while acknowledging that the current trade situation with the United States and unfair trade practices from other countries, that combination guts our steel industry. Beyond border measures, the Prime Minister outlined a $70 million investment in labor market development agreements to provide training and income support for up to 10,000 affected steel workers. He described this as a way to ensure workers have the skills and the support that they need to meet the future needs of this industry. To foster long-term competitiveness, Ottawa will allocate $1 billion through the Strategic Innovation Fund to help steel firms advance projects that will increase their competitiveness, catalyze production of steel products not currently produced in Canada, and create jobs in growing sectors of our economy, including in defense. Carney also announced reforms to existing financing programs. The Large Enterprise Tariff Loan Program will see its minimum annual revenue threshold halved to $150 million, its minimum loan size reduced to $30 million, and its maximum term extended from 5 to 7 years, all while requiring companies to retain and reinvest in their workers. He characterized these enhancements as vital to give Canadian steel companies the capital and the time to build the skills, the tools, the facilities to serve a growing Canada. Finally, in a move aimed at stimulating domestic demand, the Prime Minister committed to changing federal procurement rules so that companies contracting with the federal government will be required to source Canadian steel for government contracts. Carney concluded by invoking the post-war era of rapid industrial expansion. After the Second World War, Canada built homes, factories, infrastructure at rates never seen before. Now we must pivot again. For Canada to build big things fast, we need our steel industry to advance, not retreat. The industry impact was immediate. Lana Payne, president of Unifor, warned, "So this is going to have a very quick impact, I will say to you, on steel industry, as firms brace for shrinking U.S. market access." Tim Houtsma, CEO of Nova Scotia's Merit Industries, added, "We are going to tighten our belt and we are going to need to watch our cost because we are going to be shut out of the U.S. market for some period of time." Amid these warnings, Carney told the House of Commons, "We are in intensive negotiations with the Americans and, in parallel, preparing reprisals if those negotiations do not succeed." Rahim Malou, managing director of Conquest Steel, in an interview with CBC, offered a detailed appraisal of both the strengths and shortcomings of the announcement. "It's very refreshing to hear our belief in the country, economy, and manufacturing sector shared by our Prime Minister," he said, emphasizing that Canada has the potential to become our own best customer for steel if the transition is properly supported and managed. While acknowledging that the measures will be difficult in the short term, he commended their promise of very positive long-term benefits. However, Molu cautioned that the fight against unfair trade practices demands stronger enforcement. Noting that dumping has been a challenge we've been facing for years and it's progressively gotten worse, he praised the new tariffs on Chinese melted steel, but warned that too many importers simply skirt current regulations by importing minimally processed or finished products and reselling them here under the guise of being Canadian-made. He urged Ottawa to clamp down on these loopholes, especially around raw materials and tariff rate quotas, calling such action a huge benefit for manufacturers like us and crucial to preventing demoralizing knockoffs from flooding the market. On procurement, Molu highlighted the importance of domestic steel requirements in government projects. He noted that Conquest Steel's raised garden beds and other municipal products could easily be made in Canada, and that embedding a federal and ideally provincial and municipal rule to source Canadian steel is a very big incentive and bonus for manufacturers in Canada. Reflecting on the past 6 months, Molu described the period as stressful and exhausting, recalling how CSI manufacturing essentially lost our U.S. market overnight in early 2025 and had to pivot rapidly to sustain its workforce. Yet he praised the huge silver lining of public support, which he said encourages us to push forward. Despite the ongoing trade war yo-yo, with tentative hopes dashed and renewed tensions surfacing, Molu remains optimistic. "I've never believed in this country more now than ever. We have the potential to become a global powerhouse, even if we don't thump our chests as loudly as the Americans, and hearing our leadership voice that belief confidently means it will be worth it in the long run." Alongside the steel industry, economists praised the move and proposed additional measures to secure and safeguard the economy. A Bank of Nova Scotia economist suggests that Canada could bolster its response to the Trump administration's tariff onslaught by barring U.S. firms from bidding on major infrastructure and defense contracts. Instead, Ottawa could award those projects to businesses based in Canada, Europe, Asia, or Latin America, offering a form of leverage that stops short of escalating retaliatory duties, according to Derek Holt, the bank's head of capital markets economics.
There are lots of tools at Canada's disposal in a more passive set of tactics, rather than locking horns over tariffs, Holt wrote in a note to clients Wednesday. He added that Canadian purchasers can buy smartphones, vehicles, and capital goods from many other companies at home and companies across other countries in Asia and Europe, which represents the risk of lost opportunity for American firms exporting to Canada.
Last year, Canadian consumers, businesses, and other organizations imported roughly $440 billion in goods and services from the U.S., more than from any other trading partner per U.S. Commerce Department figures. Holt's proposal follows U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to levy a 35% tariff on select Canadian products effective August 1st. Despite several concessions by Mark Carney's government since the trade dispute began, the Prime Minister acknowledged Tuesday that Washington has shown little sign of a full rollback of tariffs. Holt also pointed to Canada's critical minerals reserves, key inputs for U.S. manufacturing and energy, as another potential lever. The best option, of course, is for Canada and the U.S. to remain tightly integrated in a sensible agreement. Failing that, political uncertainty and alternative arrangements are at risk, he wrote. It is not in America's best interest to have instability across the Americas in its own backyard. To provide additional context and highlight the importance of steel trade between the U.S. and Canada, let's take a closer look at the most recent figures on trade value and volume between the two countries. In 2024, Canadian steel exports to the United States totaled 6,557,000 net tons, making Canada the largest foreign supplier to the American market and accounting for roughly 11% of U.S. steel imports. Those shipments were valued at US $7.83 billion for iron and steel products, according to United Nations Comtrade data, and more than 90% of Canada's total steel exports flowed south of the border, underscoring the two countries' deep integration. Although volumes were down 5% year-over-year, Canadian mills remained well ahead of the next largest supplier, Brazil, 4.5 million net tons. Conversely, U.S. steel producers shipped about 8 million metric tons of steel into global markets in 2024, of which Canada absorbed roughly one-fifth, around 1.6 million metric tons, making it the single largest destination for American steel exports. Those U.S. exports of iron and steel to Canada were valued at $4.78 billion, with an additional $6.69 billion in articles of iron or steel, such as fabricated structural components, crossing the border over the same period. This bilateral exchange reflects a balance in North American trade. Canadian fabricators rely on specialty steels from U.S. mills to meet domestic demand, while American producers depend on Canadian output to supply critical downstream industries.
Thank you for watching. As an independent channel, we don't have corporate backing. We rely on your support to keep going. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps more people find our work. Thank you so much for being part of our community. Check out the next video on your screen. We picked it just for you.